The Treaty of Versailles was a peace treaty that was signed after World War I on June 28, 1919 between Germany and the Allied powers. World War I, also known as the Great War, began on July 28, 1914, right after the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand by Gavrilo Princip, who was from Austria-Hungary. There were a total of 30 countries involved, but the main fight was Germany, Austria-Hungary, and the Ottoman Empire against Great Britain, France, Italy, Russia, the United States of America, and Japan. World War I resulted in an immense amount of damage, everything from hundreds of thousands of square kilometers lost to a total of more than 15 million people that died, along with 20 million that were injured. Almost all of this damage was blamed on Germany because Kaiser Wilhelm II, who was the last emperor of Germany from 1888 to 1918, when Wilhelm was forced to resign and be exiled to the Netherlands after the German army collapsed due to the US military forces, promised full support to Austria to fight Serbia. Therefore, the Treaty of Versailles was created to inflict strict obligations that Germany had to follow, along with many reparations. The main purpose of this treaty was to oppress Germany so that another world war could not occur again, and also to maintain peace among nations that were involved with World War I. Representatives from approximately 27 different nations first attended when the Treaty of Versailles was first introduced in January, but the meetings were mainly influenced, dominated, and controlled by the Big Four. The Big Four were the leaders of the most powerful nations during this time period. It consisted of Prime Minister Georges Clemenceau of France, President Woodrow Wilson of the United States of America, Prime Minister David Lloyd George of Great Britain, and Prime Minister Vittorio Orlando of Italy. Although the Big Four were the leaders of the Treaty of Versailles, each leader had very different goals and ideologies. France's Prime Minister Georges Clemenceau's main goal was to punish Germany and to seek revenge for France. Clemenceau wanted to abolish as much of the power that Germany had so that Germany would never have the opportunity to attack his country again, since France experienced a great amount of loss during World War I. He also wanted compensation from Germany for all their losses. Woodrow Wilson, the President of the United States, wanted to end wars and make the world safer by achieving world peace. Wilson also had the goal to decrease the level of devastation that occurred due to the war with his 14 points. He continuously pushed to establish the League of Nations, which would allow the political parties of countries to talk about disagreements instead of fighting. And he also promised self-determination, which is the right for individuals of a country to make decisions regarding political matters without the influence of external forces. David Lloyd George of Britain often said he wanted to make Germany pay for what they had done because that was what the majority of the British population wanted to hear, but really he promoted justice over revenge. He also wanted to limit communism because he was concerned about the Russian Revolution of 1917, and he saw Germany as the only barrier that would help keep the influence of communism from spreading west. Prime Minister George also wanted to continue to expand the borders of the British Empire, increase international trade for Britain, and for Britain to keep control of the seas. Prime Minister Vittorio Orlando's main objective was to receive the land that was promised to Italy in the Treaty of London, but he did not achieve his goal of regaining Italy's land and was often left out of discussions regarding important matters. Therefore, he eventually resigned before the Treaty of Versailles was signed due to frustrations which made the Big Four into the Big Three. To sum it up, Clemenceau was not interested in just peace, but instead he was interested in retribution, which included Germany recognizing the harm they caused upon nations and to make appropriate reparations to address each issue. Wilson wanted to forget what happened in the past and find ways to make the world peaceful in the future, and George was in the middle of Clemenceau and Wilson, wanting a bit of justice and a bit of peace.
During the creation of the Treaty of Versailles, President Wilson's discussion and arguments at the Paris Peace Conference were mostly based on his 14 points, which was written in January 1918, 10 months before World War I ended. He believed that his 14 points were a way to provide stability to Europe after the war and improve international relationships to achieve peace. The 14 points were: open diplomacy. Countries and their powers shouldn't have secret treaties. Freedom of navigation. Travel on seas should be free when there's war and when there's peace. Free trade. Trade barriers should be removed to increase trade between nations. Multilateral disarmament. Every country should decrease the amount of their forces to the lowest possible level. Colonies. Those that live in European countries should have a voice regarding their future. Russia. Russia should be allowed to have any form of government they want, and the other countries should accept, welcome, and support their government. Belgium. Belgium should be evacuated and restored to how it was before the war. France. France should get Alsace-Lorraine back, along with all the other pieces of territory lost due to war. Italy. Italy's borders should be changed and readjusted in accordance to nationality. National self-determination. The nations in Europe should be independent when possible. Romania, Montenegro, and Serbia. These three nations should be evacuated, and there should be an outlet to the sea for Serbia. Turkey. The citizens of Turkey should have a voice regarding their future. Poland. Poland should become an independent state, along with an outlet which would allow them access to the sea. League of Nations. All nations should form an assembly to protect world peace in the future. Although Wilson truly believed in his 14 points, they were not accepted by the Treaty of Versailles or the American Senate. However, Wilson's other idea, the League of Nations, was signed by 42 nations on January 10, 1920. The League of Nations was an intergovernmental organization with its main task being to maintain peace by making sure war did not break out again. It was able to solve minor conflicts for a bit of time, but major powers ignored the organization. Its effectiveness was put to the test in the early 1930s when it was unable to settle the conflict between Japan and China, which eventually led to the dissolving of the organization in 1946. Going back to the Treaty of Versailles in 1919, the opening article of the repartition section was Article 231, also known as the War Gut Clause. Article 231 required Germany to accept full responsibility for causing the war and all of the loss and damage that resulted from it. Germany was made liable for all of the materials that were damaged, and £6,600 million were needed to be paid. Germany's armed forces were also impacted by Article 231. Germany's army could now only have 100,000 men. Its navy was also restricted to only 100,000 tons regarding vessels, along with only 6 ships and no submarines, and their air force was abolished.
This political cartoon depicts how the Treaty of Versailles, along with Article 231, was forced upon Germany by the Allied powers. The so-called peace terms created for Germany did not successfully and efficiently solve the issues that were left after World War I, but instead created even more tension and hatred among nations, which built up over the years and resulted in another world war.
Another major issue covered by the Treaty of Versailles was Germany's colonies and territories. Before World War I, Germany's Emperor William engaged heavily on strengthening Germany's armed forces. Germany was a continuously expanding superpower on the global scale and began to challenge Britain, especially in the area of naval forces, and eventually surpass them as Europe's leading industrial power. After World War I, Germany's colonial empire was confiscated and divided between Belgium, France, Poland, Denmark, Czechoslovakia, the United Kingdom, and certain British dominions. Belgium was given Eupen and Malmedy. France was given Alsace-Lorraine. Poland was given West Prussia, Posen, and Upper Silesia.
This video shows where the Central Powers and Allied powers are located geographically and the amount of territory that was taken and lost during World War I. The purple represents the Central Powers like Germany, and the red represents the Allied powers like Britain and France. As you continue to watch the video, you can see the rapid increase of land the Central Powers have taken in just over a few years, along with their small losses. Now that you've seen just how much land the Central Powers gained, this video shows the amount of land that the Central Powers lost and how they were divided among other nations. Article 119 guaranteed that the land taken away from Germany would not be returned, and Germany's colonies that were overseas were taken by the League of Nations. The Treaty of Versailles may be seen as a harsh punishment that the rest of the world enforced upon Germany, or maybe even a mistake which led to more problems and even more deaths. However, many important legacies were created because of the Treaty of Versailles, and especially Article 231. The events before the Treaty of Versailles, along with the events that followed after, eventually led to one of the biggest events in history, World War II. Due to the Treaty of Versailles severely oppressing Germany, a vast majority of German citizens voted for Hitler and the Nazi Party in the 1920s to 1930s because of Hitler's influential promise of uplifting Germany to become a compelling and powerful nation once again. So, what are your thoughts on the Treaty of Versailles? Would it have been better if the world had just forgiven Germany at that time in order to prevent World War II from ever occurring? Or was World War II bound to happen anyway? Or did the Treaty of Versailles help the world out in the long run by pulling nations out of an economic crisis? Questions like the ones you just heard are often the questions that are left for us to think about and to answer. So let me ask you once more, what is your stance on the Treaty of Versailles?